which I'm not used to. I feel a bit uncomfortable. But here's chapter 6 of Flanders' Friend. The last thing he wanted to be was to be late for school again. It was becoming a habit. I have to go now, but I'll be late. Unless I'll be late. Oh, Tim shouted through the trees. Then he reached into his bag and he pulled out a red, shiny apple and he tossed it towards Arthur, who caught it like a wicket-keeper. Bye, said Tim as he hurried through the woods, and when he was at the edge, Tim looked back to see Arthur biting into the apple. But the funny thing was that Tim was sure that he could see the trees swaying in the wind behind Arthur, as if it was made of cellophane. Tim had no time to wonder about this, and he shrugged, and he knew that his eyes were bad, but he didn't think they were that bad. As he sat at his desk at school, all he could think about was chatting to Arthur. He never had a real friend, but now he thought he'd found one. He daydreamed through all of the lessons, and when the bell rang to go home, he walked out of the school gates with his bulging bag with a new sense of purpose. As he was nearly there, a worrying thought occurred to him. Would Arthur still be there in the woods? After all, tramps can take off at any moment, he thought, worried. He had only spoken to him once. What right did he expect Arthur to stay around? It was a crushing realization, and when he reached the opening of the woods, his heart was racing. He peered into the distance, and his fear subsided as he saw the familiar sight of Arthur. But there was something different about him. He seemed to be surrounded by thick, grey, swirling smoke. As Tim got closer, he could see that he had lit a small fire, and Arthur was bent down and warming his hands around and over it. "How's it going?" said Tim. He still felt a little nervous after all they had only just met. "It's okay," said Arthur. "Just a bit cold," he said gruffly, as he held his hands over the flickering flame. Tim didn't want to ask him too many rude questions, as he didn't want to pry. "It must be cold living out here," he said. "Oh, it can be," said Arthur, "but I have a big tent over there, and I'm used to it," he said, smiling with his crooked teeth. Tim watched the flames dancing, and he wondered what to say next. After a few minutes, Arthur spoke. "How was your day at school?" he said. "It was okay, a bit boring," Tim said. He couldn't help being honest. Arthur laughed loudly, and his laugh echoed through the woods. "I never liked school much either," he said, "apart from sport." "What sports did you like?" asked Tim, enthusiastically. "Cricket," said Arthur with a wry smile, and he swung his arm as if holding an invisible bat. "Look, we could do that," said Tim. "I have a bat and a ball at home." "That would be fun," said Arthur, "but I'm a bit out of practice," he said with a chuckle. The fire was popping and crackling, and they both leaned over it and warmed their hands. It was a good icebreaker. Tim was beginning to feel more at ease with Arthur, and he realized that he didn't have all of the time. He didn't want to pry into Arthur's life. He was obviously homeless, but he seemed quite happy about it. Tim was pleased that he had a tent. He would have been very worried to see Arthur sleeping out in the cold. Arthur was dressed in military uniform, and it was obvious to Tim that he had been in the army and that he was a survivor. After a while, the sky grew darker, and Tim had to say goodbye. He felt guilty leaving Arthur in the cold, lonely woods, but he was glad that he had made a new friend. "See you tomorrow," said Tim, and Arthur grinned, and he saluted like a proper soldier. He's funny, thought Tim, and he felt a surge of warmth inside him. It was happiness. Usually his happiness didn't last long, and as he walked the familiar cobbled streets, he spotted a group of stragglers from school. They'd probably been in detention, he thought. "Hey, Dimothy," one of them shouted. "Oh no," he thought, and he walked quicker. He didn't want to run, as that would make him look like a coward, and just add fuel to the fire. I'm a bit lost. I hope you enjoyed that section, reading into my phone, which I'm not used to. Please sub me if possible. I'll read another chapter tomorrow when I put the chapters in the book, because I forgot to put chapters in the book. I know I'm moving my head around a lot.